Welcome to the Archaeoastronomy database. Today we'll be looking at Carrowmore, a complex of megalithic sites in County Sligo, Ireland. If we take a look at the surrounding area, and I have an overlay map here that comes from the website carrowkill.com, which is an excellent resource for prehistoric sites all throughout Sligo and beyond in Ireland. I recommend you check it out if you haven't done so already. But you can see here that the site of Carrowmore sits between Knocknarea, topped by Queen Maeve's Cairn, and Loch Gill. And if I come in here and give you a 3D view, you'll notice that Knocknarea is quite prominent, as seen from the site, situated here below, and of course Knocknarea is sitting out here towards the sea, and there you can see that Sligo town is nearby. And so we're situated right here in this area, not far from Knocknarea, and that will play an important role in some of the alignments that we'll look at that could possibly have been intentional from this site. So to begin, we will first look at the area over here. This is the parking area, and there's a visitor center. And the various megalithic sites usually consist of either boulder rings and then a central chamber of some type with possible remains of passages after the manner of passage tombs. And each site kind of is different in what has been preserved and what remains. So we'll take a little further view out again, and you can see that there have been various numbering systems used over time for the various sites, and sometimes it gets a little bit confusing as to which site is which, because over the years some of the numbering systems have conflicted a little bit, but the one that I'm using here is fairly standard. And not all of the sites marked are passage tombs. Some are listed on the Historic Environment Viewer as just megalithic structures in general. Others have been reclassified as kists or barrows or enclosures or just other types of sites, but the numbering kind of remains. So we'll begin up in this area, and there are a couple of sites here, 1 and 2, but we're going to focus especially on site 3 to start with. And these overlays that I've included here come from a really excellent resource that I will share here on the screen. It's called A Baseline Survey of the Passage Tombs of County Sligo, 2021. And it's a very extensive catalog of information about various sites throughout the county and includes aerial imagery of each of the sites. So this imagery is a lot more clear for our purposes than just the regular imagery that's included in Google Earth. As you can see here, we don't have quite the same detail. So from site 3, it's one of the more interesting ones because you can still see the remains of the passage here, just the trace of a double row of stones leading out from the central chamber under its capstone and towards the perimeter of the boulder ring, which is not perfectly positioned anymore. Some of the boulders are slightly displaced. So along this line, according to my estimates, we should be able to see, no, we've been shifted, so here's a little three-dimensional view you can see along this line. Keep in mind that these 3D photos that are included in Google Earth are not always lined up exactly with the underlying imagery. So if we move back, we can see that we were shifted to a photosphere that was a little off in placement and orientation. So here, looking along this line, is where the moon would rise at its maximum southern position during a major lunar standstill. And we're actually in the Major Lunar Standstill season, even right now, as of the making of this video, in the summer of 2024, and the standstill period will continue through 2024 and all the way through 2025, with an absolute maximum around March of 2025. But all through this year or so on either side of that, you'll still have the moon every month reaching almost the exact same extreme maximum northern and southern positions, just with a slight bit of variation. So there are actual opportunities to observe some of these alignments depending on what's still visible at the site and any obstructions that might exist in the modern day. So if you're in the area and you have a chance, the Archaeoastronomy database Facebook page and website, which you can see linked in the video description, have resources on the dates for observing lunar standstills and lots of helpful hints and resources that can help you to be able to make those kinds of observations. And always keep in mind that the modern maximum lunar positions are still slightly less extreme than in the Neolithic, but any photos along sightlines with clear imagery of the moon can be used to extrapolate the ancient position. So you can see here this bright star, Fomalhaut, is representing for us the position of the maximum southern moonrise, right in line with this passage. That would be very interesting to confirm and to record data for. Also from Site 3, as you're looking northwest toward the horizon, you look past Tomb 4, and then a little higher on a rise that's not quite as accurately depicted here as it could be, you'll see Site 7. I'm going to mark that here. And somewhere in that vicinity is where the maximum northern moon during Major Lunar Standstill would rise. And we have that simulated here with the star Elnath. And so as it rose on the horizon, not long after, it would sit directly above Site 7 and over the edge of Site 4 as well. And so depending on the actual situation, that would be worth observing to see exactly how the moon would interact with these sites. In fact, the same thing could be viewed from Site 4. Again, bringing the rising point in line with Site 7, but on the horizon above it, depending on the height of that site. So let's take a look again at this next site, Site 4, now that we've moved towards it. And Site 4 has not much of a boulder ring, but it has a very intact chamber with its capstone. Now, estimates are that this is the orientation given by the baseline survey that I referenced earlier. And they don't give exact orientations, but just mention that it's south-southwest. But looking at the capstone here and the position of the stones that hold it up, if that is indeed the orientation, then it's entirely possible that this could also be aligned on that same maximum southern moonrise. So taking a look here, we can see the chamber, and this is the opening. There's a little gap in the back as well. And this is a little bit better oriented as far as the directions here. And you can see that the building sits right here in line with this. So if we were to, it's a little tight squeeze to position yourself inside the chamber, but perhaps the camera looking from the back gap all the way through the chamber, or just a camera placed in the chamber, could sight along this line, and would have to wait until the moon rose beyond the roof of the building. But if images were taken at a sequence or a video was captured, then the angle that the moon was rising could be traced back down to the estimated horizon without the building in place, and then it could be further refined depending on the difference between the moon on that particular observation and the ancient position of the moon, and we could get a pretty good idea of how the moon would be framed within the entrance opening of this chamber. That would actually be for the moon setting to the southwest. But the moon rising at that same maximum southern position could be observed from Site 4, looking across to Site 59, which, depending on whether it had a mound or its height, would have been pretty much on the horizon right there, with the maximum southern moon rising as viewed from Site 4, just perhaps on top of the mound if there was one at the time, and then as the moon stayed low on the horizon and set not many hours later, that alignment was captured by the orientation of the chamber itself. I also noticed from this site that there's a prominent cliff face in the distance on the horizon here, and the star Deneb in the constellation of Cygnus the Swan held position in what I like to term a stellar standstill for the vast majority of the Neolithic period. It was kind of at the low point in its cycle due to precession, and so it held the same declination more or less, and it would have been visible, if it was visible low enough, it could have been seen intersecting the cliff face and then rising at a slightly higher altitude to the right and above. And at that altitude, it definitely would have been visible once it cleared the horizon completely. And if you've been paying attention to some other videos, this alignment to Deneb at its stellar standstill during this period seems to have been of interest at many sites throughout Ireland and even beyond. So from Site 4, we'll move forward. There are other sites that were noted during earlier surveys, but some are now completely destroyed or are no longer visible in any way. So returning to Site 7, the orientation that's given for this chamber is east-southeast. And looking at the capstone and some of the other placement, I am taking a baseline estimate of a position about 1/16 of a year south of the equinox position. So that's either somewhere in the line of 22 to 23 days before the spring equinox or after fall equinox. And that would be for the sun rising. It would be out toward this horizon. So to give you an idea of what that might look like, there are various proxy dates that can be used. I'll take something around October 16th. And there's another corresponding one when the sun is moving northward as well. And you can see there that that's along that line. Now, also interestingly, from this site, if we were to look towards Queen Maeve's cairn on top of Knocknarea around April 13th, that's a position 1/16 north of the equinox. So with the sun setting in the vicinity of the cairn atop Knocknarea. And the exact date may need to be refined a little bit through observation, but it should fall within that range. So that's nicely connected both in the orientation and the sighting of this particular tomb. Okay, moving down to Site 13, it was a little difficult to judge the exact positioning of this capstone and chamber. You only have so many angles that you can view it from here. Though when I was on a field visit a few years ago, I was able to capture some images of my own. And so, based on this, I think it's possible that I'm not sure exactly whether this stone here is originally placed, but the maximum northern moon set may have been visible at an angle coming just past this. It looks like the summer solstice sunset would be blocked by that. A more central orientation is well beyond the range of the lunar standstills. It could have a connection to Deneb as it's setting, as opposed to coming back up again. But that would take a little more investigation to be sure of. But one thing that I did notice is that just looking from this position back towards Knocknarea, we have a similar alignment to the one up at Tomb 7, to that 16th of year north of the equinox position, with the sun setting into the cairn. Okay, there are some various other sites. Some of them are very near modern buildings, including these on either side of this house. And then of particular interest is Site 27. Now, Site 27 has what we often see in other passage tombs in Ireland, a cruciform chamber, and the remains still indicate how it was laid out. So the imagery isn't very clear in Google Earth, but with this overlay image from the baseline survey, we can see that the cruciform chamber plan seems to be pointing to the northwest, and it's extremely possible that the summer solstice sunset would have aligned with that passage orientation. So you can see there's just the imagery, and there is the plan. Again, from carrowkill.com. So if we were to go to June 21st, we could see the sun setting along this line, and in the Neolithic would have been slightly further north, but the modern sun can give us a pretty good indicator. Usually in Google Earth, I will use the stars in the Pleiades to give me an indication of where the sun would have set in the Neolithic. Usually that, not the brightest star, but the bottom left star will give you a pretty good idea of the center of the sun in the Neolithic. Okay, moving from Site 27. There is a barrow here that could have been built later and would have had the moon just to the left of the larger cairn, number 51. If I were to place a marker for the cairn, we could see, indicated by Elnath right here, that it would have set just there into the left edge of the cairn, which of course probably would have had a little bit more slope profile. This is just a rough 3D marker I placed. From Site 49, the summer solstice sun would rise from Tomb 51. And would have sat above the tomb, depending on its actual height. Again, this is just a rough marker. So as we move towards the center, we have Tomb 51, Listogil, and it has in its center a chamber with a capstone, And there are indications that this may have been more like some of the other sites in the past, and that this large cairn, which has been reconstructed in modern times, was placed later. And there's some disputation about whether it had a passage at all, but they've left this passage to access the center in the cairn. But that's not really necessarily the original situation. Currently, around October 31st, and then in a corresponding second time in the year, the sun can be seen rising from the position of the chamber, looking down this modern passage. And I'll model that here quickly. But if you visit the site, you'll notice that the actual orientation of the chamber under the capstone seems to be a little further to the right, and it's possible that the chamber itself was meant to line up closer to the actual cross-quarter date, which can be used in a modern proxy around November 7th, rising just a little bit further to the right here. Also, from this viewing position, it's been noted by Archaeoastronomy Ireland, which has a great Facebook page detailing many of the alignments throughout Ireland. And they have an entry talking about the minor standstill positions, the southern minor rising positions of the moon. And from this site, they could be seen to rise over Sligo, here on the peak of this hill. And then the moon would be visible setting over on a passage tomb called Neolithic on the southwestern horizon. So that would definitely be worth checking out. And keep in mind that you don't have to wait till the minor standstill to observe alignments to those positions, because the sun, because that's less than the solar range, the sun crosses through minor standstill positions twice every year. And so the Archaeoastronomy database has resources that can give you a proxy date to observe the sun in place of the moon. So I believe that covers all the alignments from Tomb 51 outward toward the horizon. And then from some of the nearby tombs, there are more views looking towards Tomb 51. But actually there is one more position that you could take looking towards Knocknarea. And somewhere around, say, April 22nd, this is just a rough estimate, the sun would be seen setting into Queen Maeve's cairn on top of Knocknarea. And this might correspond with a stellar alignment, possibly Altair, during the Neolithic, especially around this period of 3600, 3500 BC, which is when Carrowkill is often dated to. It could also just correspond to about halfway in declination from solstice to equinox. Not a halfway count in time, which would be the cross-quarter position, but a halfway measurement in the height of the sun. So now, looking from the ruins of Site 52, we can see that Site 51 would be fairly prominent. We'll turn the marker on. And there could be similar alignments to those that we saw looking from Tomb 51, or there could be a stellar alignment. I'm not exactly sure on that one, but with this positioned so well, it seems likely that there would be some connection. So that will be a subject of further investigation. Moving over to what is labeled here as 55A. The ruins here have just a little indication of the central chamber and then a small arc of stones. And from here we have the winter solstice rising directly from the cairn, or the previous chamber dolmen that was there before the cairn was built. Okay, then you can see that this chamber is oriented almost due south at Site 56, but looking from Site 56 through Site 57, and interestingly just past Site 58 and 59, and almost directly through Site 15 across the road, you'd have the summer solstice sunrise observable. So you can imagine if you were atop this mound, or atop the capstone, which is no longer in place, you'd have that summer solstice sunrise, and the shadows of all those tombs would be stretching towards each other and kind of merging in this direction as the sun rose on the horizon. And similar idea from Site 58 over Site 59. It's just a parallel alignment there, converging in the distance, but actually running in parallel here. And so moving to Site 58, and if we center ourselves, there again is the sunrise out through 59. And the sunset on the summer solstice would be back over Site 3 that we explored at the beginning of the video. So there's the sun on the horizon, and marked by the Pleiades as a little more precise marker, because the sun in Google Earth is not really scaled very well, so it's hard to determine an exact position with it. So that's why I'll sometimes use proxy stars. And you can see these two parallel lines that the situation is similar from Tomb 59, just a slightly different vantage, but with the sun instead perhaps rolling along the edge of Site 3 and setting just to the right of it. Now, some more interesting alignments. Earlier we noted that Site 59 had a lunar connection as viewed from Site 4, the maximum southern moonrise, but that very same maximum southern moonset just hours later on that night, you can see in the distance here Site 51 with the cairn. And it's hard to see in this image, but you can just see it through the trees here. That's the position without the imagery. And so the orientation given for this site, you can see that there's what's estimated to be the backstone, and perpendicular to that I have this sight line, and there are some stones to the right and the left. And I have an image here from my site visit, and you can see that's pointing directly at Site 51, where the maximum southern moon will set during Major Lunar Standstill. And this would be an excellent one to observe over the next year, setting right into the cairn. Alright, so I think those are the major alignments that I wanted to talk about in this video. If you have any questions, feel free to comment, and please do share a comment. It helps the video to move up in the algorithms and really helps the work of the Archaeoastronomy database to be found by more people who are interested. If you enjoy the content from the Archaeoastronomy database, please consider subscribing and liking the video. And if you're able, there are options for donating, either through Patreon or PayPal, and that will allow me to be able to continue to work on the projects that I have planned for the future. Also remember that there's the Archaeoastronomy database Facebook page. You can find linked in the video description, and the website with many other resources. Thanks for watching the video, and keep watching the skies.